We really hope that the population of those countries, they are aware of what the people that they elected are toying with.
That was Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov speaking Friday at a press conference in Antalya, Turkey. He echoed statements made a day earlier by Russia's President Vladimir Putin. Putin, in his speech to legislators in Moscow, warned that Western officials currently indulging in escalatory rhetoric should realize they are invoking the specter of an all-out nuclear war. The most recent escalatory report came Thursday in the form of an audio recording that's claimed to be a discussion by senior German military officers on how to attack the Crimean Bridge in Russia. The full text of that recording was published by RT's editor-in-chief Margarita Simoyan on Friday. She reported that Russian security officials leaked the recording hours earlier and said the original audio would be released shortly. It was released later Friday. The recorded conversation allegedly took place February 19th and included General Ingo Gerhardt, Germany's Air Force commander, and senior leaders responsible for mission planning. When assessing the intelligence necessary for targeting the missiles that would be used in the attack, Gerhardt allegedly said there are plenty of, quote, people in civilian clothes with American accents, closed quote, who are available in Kiev to cover for the Germans. Foreign Minister Lavrov also referenced that part of the tape Friday.
We know for a fact that the NATO soldiers are there, which are masked as mercenaries or in some other way. But in that conversation, there are a number of interesting things when these German generals, when they discussed what would be the most cunning way to deliver long-range weapons to Ukraine, they mentioned towers, missiles to attack the Crimean Bridge, and how they could do that. And they were also discussing, is it possible without going to Ukraine remotely to target these missiles? And one of the generals said, still it would be the direct involvement. So they understand what they're talking about.
Gerhardt's alleged comment appears to confirm a report in last Sunday's New York Times that the CIA is not only active in Ukraine. The article claimed that Langley has 12 secret bases on Ukrainian soil actively working against Russia. The head of Russia's FSB, or Federal Security Service, Alexander Bortnikov, told Russian television Thursday that the CIA has many bases in Ukraine when asked about that New York Times report. All of this, in turn, takes place in the context of a recent statement by France's President Macron that NATO troops might be used in Ukraine to prevent a rout of Kiev's forces. That was followed by a warning this week from the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff of the U.S. military, which Lavrov also referenced.
Secretary Austin, Defense Secretary Austin, after he was discharged from the hospital, he claimed that if Ukraine will suffer a defeat at the hands of Russia, NATO will have to fight against Russia. So there is a quote, but I'm not quoting directly him, but that was the gist of what he has said.
For more on that, we go to Moscow to speak with analyst Mark Sleboda. Mark, what do you make of all of this?
Okay, so the current news that is kind of rocking the foreign policy and military analyst world is that the French president, Emmanuel Macron, called kind of a last-minute spur meeting in Paris that he invited 20 European leaders, and the U.S. had someone there as well, I believe Canada.
Right, that was this past Monday.
It billed as a quote-unquote peace conference, all these things are. And anyway, that's the way it was billed. But what it actually turned out to be, first of all, the Slovak Prime Minister, Robert Fico, who is a critic, shall we say, a Ukraine skeptic from a far left position, right, who is now coordinating with Viktor Orban,
Right.
whom is a similar position, but from a right conservative position.
That's interesting.
Anyway, Robert Fizzo said not a single word of peace was uttered or talked about during this meeting. The primary conversation that Emmanuel Macron really brought them together for is to talk about sending NATO troops, uniformed NATO troops directly into the conflict. And so it has been breached. I mean, this has been talked about before. We talked about it a few weeks ago about leaked papers from the United Kingdom for a proposal for a NATO expeditionary force. We heard from the former Ukrainian ambassador to the UK about contingency plans to do so. Now it has been said, and it has been said by one of the top Western leaders, by the president of France. The immediate response from most European leaders was no, or we have no plans for that at this time, from another of countries. The United Kingdom immediately responded, we have no plans to send more troops than we already have there. Which of course is a rather interesting non-denial. I mean, it should be remembered, and the Financial Times reminded us of this in the hour since, that NATO has special forces all over Ukraine, right? Hundreds of special forces and intelligence. The British papers have told us already more than a year ago that they have 300 Marines, Royal Marines there on the ground conducting high-risk operations, right? So NATO is already involved. And I think Emmanuel Macron is particularly incensed because there was an incident a little over a month ago that Russia complained about very loudly, where outside Kharkov, a number of what it says Russia says were French mercenaries were killed in a Russian missile strike, and France denied that they had anyone there, and then they admitted it, but then that they were just volunteers. And what it turns out, of course, is that these are a number of French Foreign Legion specialists and high-tech weapon specialists, like those who operate air defense systems, who all coincidentally just happened to resign from military service and become humanitarian workers in Ukraine. And then when France, having denied that they were there, secretly sent officers to recover the bodies, Russia hit again. And Macron evidently is incensed over this. So this leads the way. Right now, Macron pointed out that there is not a consensus for this now, but like how every country in Europe and the United States have shifted position on the amount and type of lethal aid they will provide Ukraine since the beginning of the conflict. Joe Biden once famously said back in February of 2022 that that the U.S. could not send tanks or jets to Ukraine because that would be World War III. And here we are with the first American Abrams confirmed destroyed after finally showing up on the battlefield. And he says that eventually everyone will come down, will change position, or enough of them will. Probably not all of NATO together. It will be more a coalition of the willing thing. And I have to say I agree with him, because the amount of desperation that is already evidenced, panic just at the fact that they're having to acknowledge that Russia is now winning the conflict decisively. The Kiev regime, according to many Western papers, is facing collapse, a cascading collapses along the front sometime later this year, according to the New York Times. And when Russia moves on Kharkov, Ukraine's second largest city in the Russian-speaking East, or towards Kiev, well, they'll get more desperate, and desperate people do dangerous things. And we've heard time and time again that U.S. global leadership, the rules-based order, i.e. U.S.-led Western global hegemony, is on the line. They really believe that, and they cannot be seen as losing to Russia.
That's right. This is their existential moment. Hey, Dmitry Peskov, the spokesperson for President Putin, said,
yes,
if they do what Macron said, it would not only make a direct collision between NATO and
a
Russia
probability.
possible, he said inevitable.
Inevitable. It would be an inevitability. Yes, yes.
Mark, thank you so much for your time and your expertise, as always.
Thanks for having me.
For KPFK, I'm Don DeBar.